This is Beth Darlington, paranormal investigator and owner of Access Paranormal, and you're listening to the Ghost in the Valley podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Ghost in the Valley podcast. I'm your host, Al Cooley. I'm excited today to have Shelley Kaehr back on the show. Shelley is known as the Past Life Lady. She has a new book out, and I'll be right back with my conversation with Dr. Shelley Kaehr right after these brief messages.
CLE Rocks is a podcast focused on rock and roll, the artists who defined it, the moments that shaped it, and the stories behind it all. And we're giving it to you from the city where rock and roll was born. Hello, Cleveland! CLE Rocks features interviews with music legends past and present. We explore the untold stories behind some of music's most memorable events, and we engage in lively debates that go far beyond the Beatles versus the Stones. Check out CLE Rocks with me, your host and music journalist Troy Smith, straight from the birthplace of rock and roll.
Okay, for the past 2 decades, Dr. Shelley Kaehr has worked with thousands of people around the world, helping them achieve their greater peace and happiness in their lives. Dr. Shelley's method of combining energy work with hypnosis has been endorsed by numerous leaders in the field. Shelley has a new book just released. We will talk about that and so much more. Welcome back to the show, Past Lives Lady, Dr. Shelley Kaehr.
Thank you so much for having me back on the show, Al. It's great to be with you.
Well, it's been it's been over a year. I think when I had you on the show was before or right when the pandemic was hitting, and so many things around here, and I'm sure in your neck of the woods, things are shut down, really slowed down in the paranormal field as far as paranormal investigators, not being able to go out in the field, but it did help out a lot of podcasters like myself. So I did get a lot of new followers, The last time I had you on the show, we talked about your book, Heal Your Ancestors to Heal Your Life. I have to let my listeners know that, that book blew me away because I wasn't expecting, what I was reading. This is deep. Because you're going into many generations of your family to heal yourself, and you're doing it through hypnosis, correct?
Yes. The book, I forgot that was all the way back in 2021, that book came out. And so, it's been a while. It's based on this process that I developed early on in my private practice to help people go and meet with their parents, not the physical people who are on the planet, but just go have a conversation with mom and dad. Maybe there were some things that needed to be forgiven or healed. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, let's ask mom and dad, does anybody in the family need a healing today? And so then we travel in our minds via guided imagery into these spaces where we can send love and light to the ancestors and then receive that healing in the physical time. And since that book came out, it won a big award as like the best book of the year. And a lot of people have been reading it. And then there's really been an explosion since that time of all this stuff about ancestors coming out. It's really taking hold here in the West, because in other parts of the world, everybody, different cultures have always said, hey, we need to honor our ancestors, but that really hasn't been the case in the United States. And now it's just very common, and it's becoming more and more popular. And I think it does help people.
What do you think it is that the United States was behind in that?
I don't know. Culturally, I don't know. I don't know. We just never really thought about that before. But now, we've got the CDC doing more studies than they did even when this book first came out about the connections and the fact that we really do have the personalities of our ancestors. We're embodying that. They've done studies on inherited trauma, that we can actually have higher levels of cortisol, the stress hormone in our system, if our ancestors were, involved in very stressful conditions and things like that. So more and more and more studies are getting done that really proves that we really are connected to our ancestors. And so I think maybe in this Western world, we need a little bit more of that scientific evidence. I don't know, to get on board with things, but it's definitely changing and definitely expanding since you and I first talked, for sure.
Well, I do know that, like in the paranormal field, the paranormal investigations really skyrocketed after the COVID restrictions were starting to be being lifted, because I think it's because more people were staying home at the time. They're starting to really know their house more, because there's more activity that was, being shared with these investigators that they didn't see before. And with your side of hypnosis, the people's home more, and they're starting to realize more things about themselves or their family.
That is so interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Obviously, paranormal people cannot go out with their equipment and sit up in the haunted house when it's closed. But You're right. I think part of the problem, which I'm sure the society, we're just so busy all the time. We're running around. We've got our devices. We're being bombarded by media. And people are going to work, doing this and that. They've got 10 screens open on their computer. And the pandemic really made all of that come to a screeching halt. And I think that people really did have to come home to themselves and start thinking about things in a new way. Wow. I could definitely see where that would be like, I'm home now and I just heard a thump in the attic. Oh my gosh, because maybe they weren't even paying attention, maybe they were watching Netflix before. And I never thought about that being a byproduct, but I think you're exactly right about the other as well. We all have to sit with ourselves. I think that was very scary for a lot of people.
I just know from a couple Reiki healers in my area that their business had picked up during that time. And I think a lot of it was due to them being home, realizing things that they didn't see before. So I didn't know how that plays out, because when I was going over your books, I was going through your catalog today, I was blown away because, you've written about past lives of animals and people and Egyptian healing, sacred stones, galactic healing. The list goes on and on and on. Meet your karma. So I'm thinking a lot of this, to me, and I don't know if it's just me, it seems like a lot of it can deal with Reiki healing, when I think of karma and the stones and incense, and all that, So I was going through your books and I was just kind of like blown away with all these different topics. So how do you come up with your idea for your next book?
Wow.
Because you're kind of like, I don't want to say you're all over the place, but there's so many topics you touch upon that, from galactic healing to sacred stones. How do you know what you're going to write about next?
It kind of comes to me during the pandemic. Yeah, it was a very weird time. I was going to go out and I developed this Egyptian energy healing, this technique, and I had a full schedule. I was going to be traveling around the country. Obviously, that didn't happen. And a lot of the people who had signed up for those classes out in cities around the United States wanted to take those classes. And so I started an online school. And then I spent the next couple of years with, just teaching classes online, recording all of the classes that I've ever even done over the many years. And then really met a lot of really cool friends from that, which was really interesting because a lot of people they want to take classes. They're stuck at home. They have nothing to do. And so to the ideas, like some of the books that I have now, like the one we're going to talk about today, the one that came out in the summer, there was one that came out summer. And even this one, that's one I had, The Past Lives in Ancient Lands and Other Worlds. That's one I wanted to write for quite a long time. But the one that came out in the summer was The Journeys Through the Akashic Records. That was specifically something that came out of a class that I taught during the pandemic because the students said we were done with all of my modalities. Okay. They took a bunch of classes from me. I had this group that would meet regularly and they were like, we want to learn more. We want to learn more. And I was like, well, what do y'all want to learn? And they said, well, we want to learn how to access the Akashic Records. And I was like, well, my gosh, I've been doing that for years. Okay, well, let me just put together all of my guided journeys into a book. So the books that are coming out now, and I just finished a new book. I don't want to say exactly what it is, but it's different than anything I've ever done. And it's longer than anything I've ever done. Probably will be out next year, but that's another one. Took me 2.5 years to write or whatever. That came out of the pandemic also. So a lot of my newer stuff is specifically what students have asked me to please address. And then other, like the Heal Your Ancestors, Llewellyn asked me if I would write some more books for them. They contacted me and I said, well, maybe I should pull that old thing out of the drawer. I've never told anyone about the genealogical regression, even though I had been doing it for 20 years, but it was like that little thing that I would do every now and then to help a client who I felt like needed family healing, but I never wrote about it. I never talked about it. And then it was just so weird because right when it came out, like I said, it was just a flow, like the consciousness had just opened up and everybody's into this now all of a sudden. I don't even know how that happened. So I kind of just get an idea. Maybe students bring it up. Maybe it's just an idea. Galactic healing is about an alien who I saw many years ago in the early part of my career who showed me some healing things. And then I more recently developed a series of techniques called Pythagorean healing. And I started publishing those finally. Those, again, are things I've been doing for 20 years. I never put them out before, but I put them out during the pandemic because the students who had taken the Egyptian healing class didn't have anything to do. And they wanted to take more of these healing classes. So I said, okay, well, it's time for me to get it out of my head and stop just doing it, but actually just writing about it and showing people how to do it. And so that's really, I guess it's my students and my readers who really drive a lot of that.
Speaking of Llewellyn, I mean, they're fantastic publishers. You know, I wrote to them, matter of fact, before you came on the show in 2021, I've written to them about any authors I like to promote on the show to help other authors out and promoting their book, whatever subject they're talking about. I'm naturally looking within the paranormal field. And your book was one of the books they sent me, you know, so, well, you know, the paranormal is the unexplained. I started reading your book and I was like, wow. I mean, and there was a couple other ones. So I was like, this really blew me away. So I got to thank Llewellyn for actually sending me your book. I can't wait to get the new book and read it. But yeah, before we get into the new book, I had another question was, I understand the past lives of people. How do you do the past lives of an animal?
The book you're talking about is called Past Lives with Pets. And so what it is,
right. Mm-hmm.
This was another one where Llewellyn said, hey, you want to write some more books for us? And I thought, well, you know, like when people come for a regression, they've got their issues that they're working on. Nobody says, you know, my dog is acting like a real jerk today and I need some counseling, you know, obviously. So in the past life regression, when they're ironing out whatever issues they have, occasionally they'll go, oh my gosh, look, there's Fido. I knew him in the Middle Ages too. And, you know, they would just tell me these things. So I collected these things over the course of many years. So Past Lives with Pets isn't about regressing the pet, but the owner finds out that the pet that they currently own, that soul is somebody, let's say, I always think of pets as people, but that's somebody that they knew in their previous lifetime. It's something, I guess I used to joke around about it. I always have cats, and I had this pair of cats when I was a kid. And then I had this other pair of cats as an adult, and they were kind of had similar personalities. And so I always thought to myself, this is weird, but I think that these are the same set of cats that I had when I was a kid, and they've come back into my life. And then you see there's a really famous fiction series called The Dog's Journey by Bruce Cameron, W. Bruce Cameron. And The Dog's Journey got made into a movie. And it's basically about this little puppy that passes away and keeps being reborn and reincarnating as a dog into this family's life. And it's like the biggest tearjerker, like bawling my head off kind of material that anyone would ever want to read. But my book is actually about real people who also believe, like I do, that the pets they had earlier in their life are reincarnated. And then there's case histories in there of occasionally somebody believes they were an animal in a past life. And the book also talks about, like, how am I going to connect with animal spirit guides, animal totems, and things like that. And in the early part of my career, many, many, many years ago, I used to go out. I live in Texas, and I was doing a lot of energy healing at that time. And I have a lot of people in my area who have big horse stables and, you know, a lot of horses out here. So they would call me in to give energy healing to their horses. And so through that and some other, you know, I do go to work with dogs or whoever, cats. And so I had some of that in there as well. It's not things that I now when I do energy healing, I'm mostly just teaching classes, but I put a lot of that in there and how people can, you know, tune into what their animal actually wants. That book just came out in second edition. So I just got done reading it. That's why it's interesting that you bring it up. But I was remembering that many years ago, these people had hired me to go out to see their little schnauzer who was in stir because the family had gone on vacation, and they put the little schnauzer at the vet's place in his little cage. And they said, oh my gosh, the vet's called, and little Fifi or whatever his name was. Oh, he's just not doing well. And oh, we need you to go over there. So I went over there, and I'm sitting there, and I'm in the book. I talk to readers about, you know, how we can quiet the mind and just, you know, let's hear what the animal says. Well, what does the animal want? He just wants food. He wants to be snuggled. I mean, there's not a lot going on there. So I came back and I told him that what had come to me was that, he wanted the neighbors to come pick him up and he wants to go stay there. He doesn't like where he's staying. So of course they did what I asked him to do. And they said, this is a miracle, and I'm thinking to myself, please, it's not a miracle. It's common sense.
Right.
It's just common sense. But they attributed this to a miracle. So I try to remind readers, guess what? You can be your own pet detective. Let me show you how. Let's take a guided journey and tap into your pet detective skills. And you too can be an animal whisperer, So there's a lot of fun things in that book. I enjoyed writing it. And then the really more heavy thing about it is, I feel like our animals they're like family members. So when we lose them, it's devastating. And I think maybe yourself, I know I have been through that, and many of your listeners. So there's guided imagery to help us resolve grief and just really heal from the loss of a pet. So there's just a lot of interesting things in that one for sure. So it was a fun one to write.
It's kind of interesting you brought that up because, in my book, I'm writing, from day one, when we first pulled into the driveway of this house, I seen the girl in the window upstairs, who I write about. Now, on the last day of leaving that house, the girl's in the window, but she's holding our pet that died in that house. Now she has the dog, and I had this past guest on, psychic medium, that when everybody dies, you either go into the light or you don't. If you don't go into the light, then you stay here in the realm of the earth forever, or you can come back many, many, many times, as like you were talking about, as somebody else. Sometimes you can go back 20 sometime. Who knows? Or you come back as an animal, or that animal comes back, like you were talking about. That animal comes back, somebody else's animal years ago. It was pretty deep, and I get a different understandings of other ways of looking at things from all my guests. Getting into your new book, Understand Your Soul's Journey Through Time, Past Lives, and Ancient Lands and Other Worlds. I mean, I'm thinking that's probably going to be as interesting as your past life ancestors. I mean, what's this book all about?
I want to say also, before I get into that, though, this story about the ghost in the window holding your dog. Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
It is, and when the dog died, and I can still remember it like it was yesterday. It always went to one corner of the house, and always just sat there and stared at this corner. And my mother always thought, the dog has to go outside, let it outside to go to the bathroom, and naturally it's not going to do nothing. It just wants to stare at this corner. Well, I remember one morning, I heard my dad do like a little weird noise, like when I'm coming down the stairs, and I could see through the railing that my dad was picking up the dog. It was kind of like, like rigor mortis. So the dog was like stiff, but it was just staring at the corner. And my dad went out back and buried the dog. And that was basically it until, in the last day moving out, she was holding the same dog. I mean, it was our dog. And I could see it like yesterday, just brought back that memory.
That's incredible. But yeah, I'm a believer in that for sure. That's amazing.
And your new book, is it going back in past lives that way through, you're talking about past lives and ancient lands? Because I remember I was looking, you had a few books on Egyptian past lives.
The new book that came out in October is called Past Lives in Ancient Lands and Other Worlds. But I do write a lot about Egypt. Those are healing books. I wrote a bunch of Egyptian healing books. The past life book is different than the one you read in 2021. So the Heal Your Ancestors is about the genealogical regression. So we're going to go heal the ancestors. This one is about going back into your own past lives that your soul had in earlier times. And so some of the issues that people are trying to resolve, we can then take them back into earlier lifetimes to see if that's like where this issue originated from, and then send healing to that. And then bringing that forward in time can help people with different issues. And so it was a lot of fun to write. It's the one that I've always really wanted to write. It gets into some of, I think most commonly, most people will go back maybe to the 1700s, maybe 1800s. But this is the ancient lands. So they're going back to some of the case studies that I've been collecting over the years of hunter-gatherers. They're out just making their way in the world. They may not even have language to obviously the Egyptians, who I love to write about, the Greeks. I wrote about Mesopotamia. I had never really done that, in the Persians, and just little case studies from different periods throughout history, the Greeks and the Romans, obviously. And then we've got a lot of guided imagery in there where people can go travel into some of these ancient lands, and if they have past lives there, and just do different exercises. And then in the second half of the book, it goes into other worlds. So when somebody has an issue and we want to go back to that origin point, what happens when that origin point, isn't on the earth? And so it gets into extraterrestrials. It also gets into the Lemurians and the Atlanteans. To back up to what you were saying earlier about all these Egyptian books, that kind of came in because I wrote some books for the Edgar Cayce Foundation. Edgar Cayce was that psychic who lived in the early part of the 20th century. He was the most documented psychic in the world. And he would go into a trance and give people readings. And he gave a lot of people readings about their past lives in Egypt. And then he also gave people readings about Atlantis. And he told them that they lived these past lives in Atlantis and these past lives in Lemuria, which was the civilization that predated Atlantis. And so because of that connection, that's really, you asked me earlier where I get all these ideas from. I think the clients that I've met and the friends that I've met through digging into the Edgar Cayce readings are interested in these topics. And then that also informs a lot of what I'm writing about. So in this section about ancient lands and other worlds, some people believe Atlantis is a real place and other people think it's pseudoscience. But to the people who really believe they lived there, of which there are many, these are very, very real to them kind of things. And so we go into some of those areas. Like, I think based on just hearing from this about this during past life regressions, Atlantis has a few different periods. So the book talks about those, like the beginning of Atlantis, the rise of Atlantis, which was in the minds of those who believe in it, was a very technologically advanced civilization. And then the fall and destruction was where the greedy mankind, destroyed the society. And so there's a lot of people who believe that the Atlanteans are back. We're all living here now. And if we don't get our act together, pretty soon we're going to blow the place up like we did last time, basically. So it's kind of like an allegory, but it's also kind of a thing that a lot of people are interested in. So there's a lot of fun things in this book, Al. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, I can't wait to get it. It's on my wish list, and in my Amazon library. It just hit me, it was this past lives in ancient lands, and I was looking back on your Egyptian books. That kind of connected to this.
It has to, I think I've been in Egypt many times in a past life, and it has to do with, again, the people that I run into as clients, many of whom believe that they were reincarnated Egyptians. This is really early stuff. In fact, I just did an interview earlier today where we were talking about this. I had been really good friends. I'm really good friends to this day with Dr. Raymond Moody, who wrote the book Life After Life. And so back in the day, him and I used to do some things together. We traveled and did things together. And so he invited me to a certification program, and he certified me in his psychomanteon training, where we build this replica oracle of the dead, and we help people have visionary encounters with their loved ones using mirrors and kind of going into trance and stuff. So I was certified in that, and I met some people from the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and then we became great friends. The minute I got into that, then I had a vision that I was supposed to write an update of their gem and mineral book. And so I contacted my friend there, and the day before I contacted her, she said they were in a meeting saying, can we get somebody to update this book? So of course, I got the contract and I started digging into those readings. And Cayce was in a deep trance, and he gave like over 14,000 readings over the course of his life that are all written down. So we have this whole database. Every time I go into that, I get ideas of things. Something just kind of occurs to me. And so I wrote the first book, and then I wrote another one in 2015, another gem and mineral healing book, because Cayce would prescribe stones to people. And then I don't know what I was doing in the readings, but I was digging into something else. And I saw there's a whole body of readings in there where Edgar Cayce talked about the people who lived in Egypt. And it was talked about the fact that Edgar Cayce in his past life was a high priest in Egypt. And so I was reading that, and I found one of the readings where he's listing the 7 symbols for man's development. And it just hit me in the face. I said, that needs to be drawn. That needs to be drawn like symbols. And that is a healing modality. And so the Cayce Foundation published the book. And this technique has gotten very popular. People all over the world do it. I just taught it in China this year. That was a thrill.
Awesome.
And so it's getting around. A lot of people in the UK doing it. Everybody seems to like it. And the thing is, so through that, though, that's how during the pandemic, all the people who like Egyptian energy healing wanted more. And then that's how some of these other things came to pass. And then during the pandemic, again, you got time on your hands. I finally got to write my book on ancient lands and other worlds that I'd been wanting to write for years and years because, we're locked in our house, Al. I mean, what else are we supposed to do,
Right.
So it was kind of a productive time for me. I know it was a very difficult time for other people, but I tried to make the most of it. I did meet a lot of new friends, and I'm grateful for those friendships. And I thank God for Zoom. That's all I can say right now.
Well, I'm going to take a short break, and I'll be right back with the rest of my conversation with Dr. Shelley Kaehr.
Okay, that sounds great.
Are you fascinated by true crime like us?
If so, check out our podcast, Crime Divers, hosted by me, Jill.
And me, Laura.
Look out for new episodes every Tuesday when we discuss true crime from around the world.
So what are you waiting for? Come join us as we dive in.
We're back with Dr. Shelley Kaehr, and we were talking about your new book that just came out. The new book, Understanding Your Soul's Journey Through Time, Past Lives in Ancient Lands and Other Worlds. Can't wait to read that one. But, I love things that hit me, make you think. You were talking about galactic healing in one of your books. Just to touch on that one real quick. So what I gather from talking to you, you're talking about, having a contact with an alien years ago. I just had a guest on just recently. He's going to be on next year about aliens and UFOs. And it's interesting to me on the vast universe that's out there. And we're just a speck, just a little tiny speck in that universe, and so many galaxies, and who knows what's out there. I mean, I believe a God created all of that. To just say there's nothing else out there just kind of blows my mind, because I think that there's things that have been here before us. I know. I just look at some of your past books, and I'm like, wow. I mean, you're a fantastic author, helping so many people out there, thousands of people through hypnosis. And I'm thinking hypnotizing people, and you can learn off of YouTube. I'm thinking that can't be, that got to be dangerous. If you don't know what you're doing, like doing a seance, or if you're doing a Ouija board, and you don't close that game out, if you don't close that seance down, you leave that portal open. And I just know from past experiences that that's a dangerous, very dangerous situation. I wanted to get your thought on going on like YouTube and trying hypnosis with no experience.
I don't think it's possible for someone to learn how to do that on YouTube.
I just heard that on another podcast. I'm thinking, I don't know if that's even real, but it just kind of brought me back to the seance, that wasn't shut down. And I had another guest on, Bishop Long, who dealt with exorcisms and how dangerous that is. If you don't know what you're doing, don't touch it, And I think yours goes even further into, if you're going outside and you're pulling a plant and you want to get rid of that plant, but if you don't get that root, the plant's that's gonna come back. That weed's gonna come back. I think that's with yours. If you don't get that root, it's I don't think if you can really cure that situation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm a philosophy doctor. I'm not a medical doctor, but like Dr. Raymond Moody, he's an actual doctor, psychiatrist, and Dr. Brian Weiss, who did regressions for many years, also a doctor. So what I'm really into right now, Al, is this idea that I do believe that people can help themselves. I would rather see somebody trying to help themselves than trying to work on someone else. And so the way I've structured my journeys, particularly in some of these later books and even in the Ancestor book, there's very specific way we're going to relax ourselves and we're going to go in there. We're not having someone out there on YouTube who we don't know. We have no idea what they're doing, doing things, because everything is written in there for a reason. And I encourage people, because I want to make sure things are affordable for people. So you could get an app on your phone. You could read these journeys, or I have my online school, where I've recorded all the journeys in my books for people so that they can go through them with me, but it doesn't cost a lot of money like it would if people are trying to get private sessions. And I really don't do as much private session anymore anyway, because I'm so busy writing these books. And as time goes on, I just feel more and more like I have to put this material out for people because it is properly done. And if you it's like, it's kind of like during the holidays, we like to bake lots of cookies or whatever. So, and we have a wonderful family recipe. Well, okay, that's fine, but we're going to dump flour all over the floor. I got to get to a party here soon. So I went to the store and I bought these little Pillsbury things that are, they're pre-made, but it's going to be good. Popped it in the oven, and 10 minutes later, they're not quite as good as grandma's, but hey, guess what? They're going to do right now for what we're doing. So I think people should think of my books then as the Pillsbury Doughboy of hypnosis, basically, that it's properly structured and the recipe will yield a peaceful and wonderful result, as opposed to just trying to go out there. We don't know who this is. I've been very, I guess, gun shy or whatever about even teaching people this, because it's very difficult to teach people how to work with other people. So many things can happen, as you know.
Just like when I go into like a paranormal investigation, I don't want to use the word amateurs, but you have people coming in there that don't know what they're doing. They're reaching out to any spirit they can try to get a hold of that may be in that building or house. And that's a really dangerous situation. And I don't think they know what they're doing. But even all the ones I've been on, 9 times out of 10, nothing happens. I mean, it's when it does happen, it may only happen to one member of that team, one person they can connect with, and that's. Or
sometimes you get a big piece of garbage on the end of the line.
They need proof. And even if you give them the proof, they still don't believe. So my thinking is, you're not going to fully understand until it happens to you. And there's so many people, and that's fine. That's cool. But I've been seeing more and more, like social media, stretch things that's not true. I think the work you're doing is really, really cool, and even going through your steps in your book, that you can do yourself, that you help guide you through, were educational.
The guided imagery in the last 2 books that I've had come out and the one you read, have a lot of guided imagery in them, but it's based on things that I have used with, however many thousands of people that I've worked with over the course of over 20 years now. So that's why I know they work, but it's through a lot of, hours of doing this. So like I said, I would rather see somebody using something like that themselves, because I think that the other thing I've been driven bananas by over the years is when somebody says, well, I went to this psychic and they told me B, and they told me I was cursed or something, and I'm thinking, okay, first of all, how are they going to know that? And even if you were cursed, I mean, is that the kind of message you want to leave people with? So I just see a lot of examples of people getting messed up from intuitive information or other things. And so to me, the witness within, keeping one's own counsel, the higher self that we all have within us, if we learn how to, go inside and hear the quiet voice of reason that's within us, has the answers to the questions that we're asking. I know we're bombarded and we're overwhelmed and life is scary, and everybody needs a shoulder to cry on. Everybody needs to run things by people, but there's no better information that you're ever going to get than what's coming out of the very quiet voice within your own soul, in my opinion.
And that's kind of like relates to like Reiki healing.
Oh, yes. I was doing Reiki before any of this other stuff. I always did Reiki. And that's the thing. That's a good example, because in Reiki, you do take a class. Your teacher shows you how to pass the universal life energy through your body and send it out your hand. So you're having a direct experience of, oh my gosh, there's energy coming out here. And so no one can take that from you. That's like a little gift that's inside you that you carry with you everywhere. That would be like somebody, like a paranormal investigator who just read about it versus one who's actually seen a spirit out in somebody's house or something. There's just something about, you've had the experience, and it's similar. Yes. And you just know that, wait a minute, there's something within myself. I can do this. And I started teaching Reiki many, many years ago. And I would, there's 3 levels. You learn how to pass energy through. Then you learn the symbols, which are more, they represent energies and intentions. And then the last level, you get to learn to be a master. And I had a really hard time, Al, just convincing people it's okay for you to learn how to do this and then to pass the attunement on to someone else so that they can do it. A lot of people they just wouldn't do it. I don't feel comfortable. And so I thought, the best thing that I can do for anybody is to teach them how to do things for themselves, because then you have that strength within you. You start to trust yourself. And so when pandemics are happening or when the world does look like it's going to heck in a handbasket, there's something within the self that is strong enough to withstand the storms that life is going to bring all of us. And it's just something I'm very passionate. And as I get older, I mean, I'm just more and more, I've got to show people how to do these things themselves. I have to. Only one person. I don't wave wands and make things go away. I mean, I think that with the proper tools, we can work out a lot of these things that we're going through when we learn, you know, how to think about things or just, and that might not be my stuff. It might be somebody else's stuff, but just that's how I did it back in the day. And I think that it's still the best way to answer these problems that we're having.
Yeah, because the way you were talking when I was listening to you, I was like, she had to be a Reiki healer. Had to be. It's interesting. I mean, your books are really, I use that word deep, you know, but it makes me think, like I say, you know, getting to the root of the problem, whatever's bothering you. I think there is so much hatred out there in this world today. It's sad. And then it doesn't matter what news you listen to because it's all the same thing. It's all bad news. Would love to have a news station on that just gives you positive news. And I think when you have some type of healing that you can heal yourself and help yourself is fantastic. I do appreciate you coming on the show today. And it's always nice hearing from you. I'm sure I'm going to have you back on because I know there's more books coming.
There's more.
I can't wait to get this new one, Past Lives in Ancient Lands. Like I said, I'm going to put all your links in the bottom of the episode so where people can get a hold of you, get your books, your website.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Al, for having me back on the show. I can't believe it's been so long and we've had the pandemic since then. And I think you're exactly right. I think the pandemic really just pulled the Band-Aid off of a lot of things that needed to come up. And I'm hoping once this comes up, then we can get a lot of this resolved. And so I just wish everybody out there peace as we just try to move through some very interesting times in our human history. But I still have faith that things are going to work out, you know?
Oh, gotta have faith. Yeah.
Yeah. And I appreciate you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful new year.
Nothing but positive 2023. I want to thank Dr. Shelley Kaehr for being on the show. And do pick up her new book, Understand Your Soul's Journey Through Time, Past Lives in Ancient Lands and Other Worlds. Available on Amazon, Kindle, or in any place else you get your books. I will have her links at the bottom of this episode. I'll see you in 2 weeks on Ghosts in the Valley podcast.